Last Defense Academy, one of my favorites from last year. With Danganronpa 2x2, 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 4 on the way. I'm anticipating the return of one of my favorite series, and it's gotten me thinking about tangentially related visual novels, like LDA. This essay was long overdue anyways, with how many times I promised I'd make it in my previous videos. But here we are. This is a deeper dive into 100-line Last Defense Academy by yours truly. Like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, please. Thank you. I think it's best to start this video by stating my thesis clearly and prominently. 100-line Last Defense Academy is too ambitious for its own good. That's not to say I disliked it. In fact, I loved and enjoyed it the whole way through. I didn't complete it in its entirety, technically speaking anyways, but I'll get to that later as that encroaches on spoiler territory. However, I was invested in the game's various plots and characters, and one day I'll return to complete it. And for the first time ever, I was having fun with grid-based combat. So if nothing else, the game gets a blue ribbon for that. If I come off as harsh in my critique, I thoroughly apologize. I don't intend to yuck anyone's yum, much less when that yum is my own. But it's for the love of the game, as well as being a fan of the two authors who made it, that I feel the need to share both my enjoyments and my critiques. To give a brief history lesson in authorship, LDA is the metaphorical baby of a metaphorical marriage between two renowned visual novelists, Kazutaka Kodaka and Kotaro Uchikoshi, and a whole team behind them named Tukio Games. Kodaka is known for Danganronpa, and Uchikoshi is known for Zero Escape and AI the Somnium Files. I myself have played through the 3 mainline Danganronpa games, and played all 3 Zero Escapes as well as the first Somnium Files. I consider myself somewhat privy to how each author operates. But as you might infer if you've played these games before, the murder mystery veins are going to run deep in this metaphorical baby. And there's no way for me to avoid talking about either the murder or the mystery. What I'm saying is, last call for spoiler warning, as I'm going to be talking about certain plot points as needed. Oh, but before you go, subscribe! Also, if you're staying for the video, subscribe! If you like Rule of 3, subscribe. I've got a small but growing collection of video essays and reviews like Abysses, Haste, and even some Mario Tennis content, being a pro Mario Tennis player and all that, with a lot more to come. And the last thing I need to clear is that my opinions are my own, but not infallible. I'll present them confidently, because if I don't have confidence in them, who will? But I won't mistake confidence for being right, especially as someone who technically hasn't beaten the game. Again, more on that later. But if you have anything you'd like to add, by all means leave a comment. I love seeing what others have to say about something I enjoy. With all that out of the way, let's turn the page on LDA. Takumi Sumino and his best friend Karuo Kashimiya live a sheltered life in the Tokyo residential complex. The sky is a ceiling, the entire city contained within a sound dome structure. There is no fear of inclement weather, no threat of war, no reason to believe anything will disturb the peace, except for one routine drill residents must observe. This drill is preempted by a blaring siren, signaling to residents they must find shelter and wait for the alarm to pass. Outside of these interruptions, this is the mundane life Takumi and Karuo live. One day, the sirens begin their cacophony. Following procedure, the kids find shelter beneath the manhole where they spend their early morning. Once the sirens die down, they climb out of the hole, but Takumi inexplicably gets jump-scared by a dog, then loses track of Karuo. Trying to hunt her down, he finds a decrepit school building where he meets Sirei, a shady mascot who does his best to conscript Takumi into a sudden war effort. Takumi initially declines the robot familiar's offer, yet finds the need to rethink it soon enough. What started as a morning drill is now the real deal. Aliens of strange shapes and patterns have reduced the city to a hellscape, and in their struggle to survive, Takumi and Karuo find themselves cornered. In their moment of desperation, it's Sirei who offers Takumi the knife, the means to fight back, the means to launch a counter-offensive. Feeling no choice left but to accept it, Takumi stabs himself through the heart, taking the leap of faith, and gains the power of hemo-anima to save what he holds dear the most, his friend Karuo. As the inciting incident of the story, it does a swell job at introducing us to the leads of Takumi and Karuo. and one of the game's major players in Surrey. We're left to understand there's an actual threat, but we don't know why it's happening. We also don't know Surrey's true motivations as far as his interest in recruiting us, why we can do this blood magic stuff, or why the city is so sheltered yet prepared for an invasion in the first place. The way Takumi describes the drills as something normal also sparks questions about both him and this residential complex. It's not exactly like we in the real world are drilled to hide from aliens in regular intervals. Not unless there's reason to anticipate such an event occurring. What we have is a layer of questions that, when peeled back, provide only more questions. And in this case, LDA has made a solid hook out of them. From the get, I'm invested in finding the answer to all the questions above. But if you know Danganronpa's storytelling, we're going to be stockpiling 100 questions before we get our real first answer. As it goes, Takumi joins Surrey, meets his classmates, the majority of whom also don't know what's going on, is stationed to fight monsters for 100 days, and then Surrey dies. Yes, Surrey, the signature mascot character with dubious intentions, is destroyed for the rest of the game on day 3. Which of course leads to more questions. Who defuncted Surrey and why? Who even made him in the first place? And moreover, what's up with the so-called undying flames surrounding the school? Sure, the game tells us how they work as a natural barrier between the school and the alien invaders, but we're missing the real how we should be asking. That is, how are these flames spawned in the first place? I'm not going to inundate you with the details, cause again, if you know Danganronpa, you know there's 100 lines of filler before the first hint of a juicy tidbit. So here's a speedrun of events that matter. A character named Hiroko claims the leader role, promptly goes missing, Takumi starts seeing a flaming ghost boy who may or may not be connected to the undying flames, and the gang sets out to find another set of classmates who are supposed to be there from the start. Things go south on this expedition, but Takumi gets saved and meets the second crew, one of whom ends up being Karuha. However, Karuha doesn't recognize Takumi and goes by Nozomi instead. Nozomi is special in that her hemo-anima hasn't quite awakened yet, so she has to use a modified suit for combat. Another set of confusing circumstances that'll only be solved further down the 100 line. From here, Takumi spends a couple weeks convincing the rest of the cast to fight, a few characters die or are revealed to have been dead, we keep receiving visions of everyone in pods, time travel is a thing, the aliens cry for help like humans when we slaughter them, then Nozomi tragically dies a few days out from completing the 100-day mission, leaving behind a lot of unanswered questions. Also turns out, the class's actual purpose was to defend the school as it completed preparations for a nuke charged by the Undying Flames. The Undying Flames, a spawn of a baby in a pod. A baby in a pod which Edo kills as he betrays what's left of the cast, and reveals he's responsible for Surrey's and Hiroko's deaths. Putting Edo in the dirt, day 100 hits, and as the gang is getting ready to go home, Takumi decides he wants to go back in time to save Nozomi and get answers to various questions. He resets back to day 1 as his friends in this timeline go back to the Tokyo Dome, only to discover it's been overrun. We're left with a cliffhanger that doesn't show or tell us what ultimately becomes of them. Whew, okay, that's a lot to cover. But now that you're caught up, we can get to the real point of the video. Throughout that brief summary, you may have noticed I drew attention to a lot of the questions we're supposed to ask of the game's story. Things like, why are we defending the school? Why was Takumi chosen along with his classmates? What was Surrey's real motivation in the first place? Why didn't Nozomi recognize us? Amongst other burning questions. While we got the answer to some of those throughout the course of this story, there's still a lot that remains unanswered. That's where the sequel begins. Once you finish the first route and go back in time to the beginning, the game opens up to become a branching visual novel with choices that affect which permutating route you take next. The expectation from this point is that each route is going to reveal something crucial to the overall story and mystery. If the first route played out something akin to Kodaka's previous work in Danganronpa, we're now entering Uchikoshi's signature multi-branching timelines that are going to piece the rest of the story together. But they don't. Not all 100 routes and endings are equal contributors anyways. At the end of the first timeline, we have a Takumi who's become battle-hardened, having lived through hell only to decline the promise of heaven at its gates. He has questions and he needs answers to them. Armed with foreknowledge of what's going to happen, he has a far greater power at his disposal. He can decide exactly how this new timeline's future will play out, rectifying mistakes and solving the mysteries that eluded him the first go-around. At first, that's precisely what he does, catching Edo in the act of assassinating Sirei, saving Sirei, Hiroko, and the Undying Flame Boy from miserable fates. We get the first divergent choice of this new timeline: kill Edo or spare him. From there, it's off to the races as tough choice after tough choice has to be made to prevent the failure of the first timeline from happening again. Comparing Takumi from the beginning of the game to the beginning of the second timeline is the difference of night and day. Where he was once clueless, afraid of what lied before him and the horrible answers he might find, he now steps forward into action to prevent a tragic repeat. It's exciting to see how this transformed Takumi will go about making amends with his foreknowledge, and how things might just go off the rails in response. So, I ask with all eagerness, why am I spending one of these branching timelines exclusively romancing characters? You might think there's some overarching reason Takumi has for making sure a certain set of characters stay close to him, like if their survival is pivotal to an event happening, they contain some answer to one of the game's big mysteries, or just because he wants to protect them out of the kindness of his heart. But no. The branching choice that leads us to this romance route is that Takumi falls off the school rooftop after almost kissing Hiroko and is put into a coma for a number of weeks, wakes back up, then gets thrown into this dating game with 4 other characters. Everything else falls by the wayside while this dating game lasts the entire 100 days. Takumi's motivations, the impending threats, the mysteries, and even his relationship with Nozomi are all thrown out the window in favor of whatever this is. It's weirdly self-contained and ignorant of other ongoing circumstances and story beats. The worst part is that Takumi indulges the dating game all the way through, never snaps out of it or recognizes that he's not any closer to finding the answers he traveled back in time for. You could argue that these are good endings for Takumi as he finds someone to share a special connection with, and that they all end or imply everyone goes home safe, but I find these to be reductionist and totally against the theming of the game in general. They're bad endings both within the story and as someone reviewing it. Takumi never finds the answers he's looking for, and we as the audience are left to wonder why Takumi is made to drop everything for the convenience of this dating game. One of the major themes of the game is the concept of awakening, whether that's Takumi awakening his hemo-anima, figuring out why everyone was at one point asleep in pods, or even Takumi just waking up every morning with variable anticipation, dread, or curiosity as to how that day's events will go. But I think the big application of awakening has to do with becoming aware of what's really going on. I would liken this awakening to be something akin to one of my favorite analogies, Plato's allegory of the cave. In this analogy, humanity exists in a cave, chained down since birth and forced to watch shadows dance along a lit cave wall. They're not aware of the chains that hold them down, nor are they aware of what each other looks like. Their only frame of reference for life are these dancing facsimiles, these distractions, if you want to call them that. One person, the philosopher argues Plato, becomes aware of the chain and undoes it. They turn around to find a fire is responsible for the light, and that the shadows are the result of objects being held in front of the flame. At this point, they can correlate that the shadows are not the real thing, which prompts them to move forward to investigate what is. They eventually reach the end of the cave and step out into the sunlight for the first time, realizing that life is more than what is in that cave. They rush back in to convince the others to undo their chains, but to the philosopher's surprise, the others insist they're content with life as it is inside the cave. To extend the metaphor here, Takumi, our philosopher, has become aware of some things, but he hasn't necessarily experienced the sunlight when he first travels backwards through time. The sunlight being the answers to the questions surrounding his purpose. Things like, why was he conscripted to fight this war? Or even what is the true nature of this war we're fighting? We're meant to question Suray's validity when he tells us to fight without giving us the courtesy of explaining why. To say I get frustrated playing a route like the romance route, where Takumi doesn't pursue these questions to instead don those chains again and watch shadows, is an understatement. It's so off the mark of where the character headspace needs to be, I'm honestly surprised it's included. And in such a large way, too. It's one of the game's longest routes, that even though it's linear, takes an egregious amount of time to complete. And not to single out this route or anyone that liked it, it's just the most blatant example of this distraction from what makes the game and its mysteries exciting to unravel. Many routes are less about finding the truth behind everything and more the plot of a maniacal sitcom. Tell me this doesn't sound like one. In this episode, Yugumu creates a potion that makes everyone love Takumi a little too much. How will Takumi handle all of his adoring fans? Find out as hilarious and increasingly uncomfortable hijinks ensue. Ignoring the dark endings for this route that turn it from joke to existential nightmare, we get nothing in the way of big answers, just seemingly random happenings. This love potion doesn't exist in any other route that I know of. It's not pivotal to any other plot that I know of. It's just something that randomly appears and derails the entire experience. The same as Takumi randomly falling off the roof and getting thrusted into a dating game. There's no indication that these events are going to happen from the choices you make, and it's not like they function as a twist. I seriously cannot stress enough just how out of the blue some of these choice consequences are. If these routes and choices do ultimately end up connecting to the game's overarching story or theme, I apologize for what would be a rash reaction. It's just, after clearing a few routes, it felt like I was sifting through the filler haystack to find the story needle. I will say, in defense of their existence at least, for those readers that want to live in this world and explore these characters to the fullest, routes like the dating game route fulfill that need, providing some nice character moments and add exposition to who they are. I just wish it did so in a way more tangentially related to the story or didn't feel jarring to initiate. I was, however, lucky enough to find one route where a large part of the story was dedicated to finding the answers Takumi, and we as the invested audience, seek. In this route, it gets explained that humans are actually the invaders. Takumi and friends were put to sleep by the government to live false lives in their own dreams to awaken their hemo-anima compatibility. And the Karwa that appears in Takumi's dream life was actually a young Nozomi inadvertently communicating with Takumi through a pod. Which also explains why Nozomi didn't have full compatibility with hemo-anima. She never underwent this process. Nozomi was not a government project, but just some kid on site under her mother's watch. And also, the cast we've grown to know are not humans, but rather Futurans, the same race as the aliens we've been slaughtering, of which there's not really much of a difference between humans and Futurans in the first place, with the commanders and most likely their illusory subordinates looking much the same as us. These are the answers the game needs to place in other routes to make them feel relevant and more enjoyable to play. It was a roller coaster learning all of this information in the same route, but by comparison, it leaves most other routes non sequitur. Or to go back to the analogy, shadows on the wall. At least with this route, we can start placing things together and answer the questions we've had. It even helps the entire allegory of the cave fit that much better. Takumi and friends, having been asleep their entire biological lives living a dream, a shadow cast upon a wall, are awoken to fight alien illusions which break through, you guessed it, an undying flame. They're awake in the physical sense, but still unaware of their reality, so they can't see beyond the illusion. They think their objective is to maintain the undying flame, and in doing so it keeps them tethered to a false life, a false purpose for being. That's the juice of the story I'm looking to sip, and when the game sticks to it, it's tasty as hell. There's also the route endings that basically exist as the wrong choice endings. As in, you get an ending within 10 minutes of making a choice that typically ends very poorly for Takumi, but if you had chosen the other option, The route is extended by multiple hours, leads to more choices, and eventually reaches a satisfying conclusion. It feels like these exist purely to meet a quota of 100 endings to stick with the blatant 100 theme. There's not much else I can say about these other than wrapping back around to the points I've been making. But they really do demonstrate the original thesis statement of the essay. That being, 100 line is too ambitious for its own good. Writing one story with a satisfying conclusion is already hard enough. Writing multiple stories with multiple endings that all connect and feed back into the story at large is insanity. I certainly appreciate and applaud the collective efforts of 2Kyo Games. Don't let my complaining override how much fun I had playing LDA, but sometimes less really is more, even at the expense of fulfilling a motif like 100 Lines Obsession with 100. As an aspiring author myself, that very notion is something I've had to struggle with too. Where does the balance lie between satisfying a theme you've set out to fulfill and keeping a story fluid? The 100 line gets blurred further when that theme is what informs the basis of the story. When Kodaka and Uchikoshi set out to create this world, the goalpost of 100 endings was one of their first establishments. You don't have to connect too many time-traveling dots to see how they tailor-made a setting to make that goal feasible. Yet, the game loses me the moment it becomes clear a route or an ending is only there to satisfy the agenda instead of furthering the story. It happens a little too often. The 100 line Last Defense Academy is a wonderful game. One of the best I played last year. It's full of shocking twists, turns, and revelations that'll blow your mind and reinvent how you think of the game. You just have to wade through more than what should be necessary to get there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all when Danganronpa 2x2 or 4 or 2x2 comes out. Bye!